very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today, our show bringing you all the latest news and events happening all around the African continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'm joining you for today's edition of our show. And as usual, we begin straight away with a look at the news making the headlines. Egypt's industry minister said Cairo is committed to achieving industrial integration with South Africa. This came during a meeting between the Minister of Industry, Khaled Hashim, and South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition in Cairo. We have the details.
Egypt is planning on expanding its economic cooperation and industrial integration with South Africa in the pharmaceutical and automotive industries. The statement was made by Egypt's Industry Ministry on Monday. The two countries are looking into enhancing industrial capabilities and competitiveness between the two countries, as well as utilizing sources in medicine, medical supplies and equipment, automotive components, and setting up logistics zones. These moves were announced during a meeting held between the Egyptian Industry Minister Khaled Hashim and South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Park Staal. South Africa is pushing to finalize negotiations with Egypt on a draft memorandum of understanding. South Africa is pushing to finalize negotiations with Egypt on a draft memorandum of understanding to develop an automotive industrial pact, building a framework aimed at improving intra-African trade on the continent, further implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area AFCFTA. Furthermore, South Africa wants to begin automotive manufacturing in Egypt and take advantage of the country's Egyptian Automotive Industry Development Program. The program provides the required framework to develop existing car assembling and manufacturing capacities and encourage new investments in this sector. This also aligns with Egypt's National Automotive Industry Development Strategy, which establishes Egypt as a main gateway for emerging vehicle markets in Africa and pursues policies aimed at increasing private sector investment and expanding manufacturing activity. The strategy seeks to increase production to 100,000 cars annually by 2030, raise local value-added content to 60%, and grow the share of domestic industrial components to above 35%.
And for more on this, we're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest, Dr. Amr Hamid, our economic expert. It's a very good afternoon to you, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your time this afternoon. Now, let's talk a bit about the importance of this partnership between Egypt and South Africa and how it aligns with the broader goals of the African Free Trade Agreement, as well as integrating African markets.
Okay, the African Trade Agreement, its core objective is not merely increasing intra-African trade, but
yes,
transforming Africa from a commodity exporting continent into a manufacturing and value-added economy. So to touch upon especially the Egypt-South Africa Industrial Partnership directly,
yes,
it supports first linking North Africa's manufacturing base with Southern Africa's industrial ecosystem, and also creating regional value chains rather than isolated national industries. Equally important as well, encouraging production within Africa instead of importing finished products from Europe or Asia. And finally, last but not least, building economies, if you like, economies of scale large enough to compete globally.
Indeed.
So this, yeah, sorry.
Right, Dr. Amr, you mentioned very important issues beyond just the scale of trade volume. Also, you know, it's a shift towards the industrialization, industrial integration between different African countries. What does this mean for economic development for African states?
Yeah, actually, to touch upon the point of economic integration, if you like, we can speak here about the traditional trade, which means Egypt, for example, export product A, while South Africa imports the product A at the same time. So the industrial integration, what does it mean? It means that the components are manufactured in both countries, and the research and development is shared, and production stages are distributed across borders, and the final products qualify as African-made,
Yes.
I mean together. And then, for example, engines may be produced in South Africa, while electrical harnesses are produced in Egypt, and batteries elsewhere, another African country, but finally assembly in either country. This transforms the relationship from buyer-seller into co-producers. The economic impact here is much larger because value creation and jobs and technology and investment are shared across the production chain.
Absolutely, Doctor. And Doctor, this is also another point, the sharing of information, the sharing of expertise across different industrial chains between African countries. Now, let's talk a bit about the role of the proposed joint committee by the Egyptian South African Business Council. How does this, for example, play a role with regards to achieving high-level agreements and translating them to agreements of integration and collaboration on the ground?
That's a good question. Experience shows that many African agreements fail because implementation mechanisms are weak. The proposed joint committee and business council can serve three critical functions.
Right.
Number one, problem solving, because it addresses customs barriers, and also it addresses certification issues and logistics bottlenecks. Also, it addresses investment approvals, of course. And then the project pipeline development, rather than discussing cooperation in general terms, they can identify specific factories, of course, industrial zones and pharmaceutical plants, and then automotive suppliers. The private sector engagement here is also very important because governments can sign agreements, but businesses invest. So that's an important link, if you want. And then the Business Council should therefore become the practical bridge between the Egyptian manufacturers from one side, South African investors from the other side, financiers and logistics providers. And of course, this could be extended to more than two African countries. Without this institutional layer, many agreements remain, of course, political declarations.
Absolutely, Doctor. Now, you spoke about, of course, the automotive industry and the development of this industry and collaboration between Egypt and South Africa, specifically in the automotive industry. Now, Egypt has an ambitious target of 100,000 cars annually to be produced here in Egypt by 2030. How achievable is this goal, considering the current pace of collaboration between the two countries?
The automotive industry development program, what we call the AIDP, it changes the investment equation because historically Egypt's automotive industry focused primarily on assembly.
Yes.
But the AIDP aims to reward local content, exports, technological sophistication, and supplier development. From the South African perspective, automotive companies, Egypt offers proximity to Europe, of course, access to the Middle East, access to African markets, and access to trade agreements covering more than 2 billion consumers. Egypt can become, of course, a production platform. Now, going to the second part of your question, if you want here, we can mention something that the target of 100,000 vehicles that you mentioned. Yes, but only under specific conditions this could be achievable. Like what? Like, for example, Egypt already possesses assembly facilities, industrial zones, logistics infrastructure, and a growing supplier base. The challenge is not assembly capacity. The challenge is, number one, local component manufacturing. Number two, export competitiveness. Number three, supplier ecosystem development. However, if major investments materialize from companies operating through South Africa and Asian partnerships, then the 100,000 units annually is achievable.
Absolutely right. Doctor, let's, just before we wrap up, let's delve into other opportunities of collaboration and cooperation between Egypt and South Africa, and Egypt and other African countries in light of the current challenges and the health sector in African countries. Of course, in light of the recent health challenges, how do you see cooperation aimed at bridging the gap, for example, in the pharmaceuticals industry, the pharmaceutical production of medicine, of ingredients or raw materials that goes into medicine, and what avenues of collaboration are there in this regard?
To focus more or less on the point that you pinpointed, let me first mention that Africa's pharmaceutical sector often suffers from fragmentation. And a medicine approved in one country may face lengthy approval processes elsewhere. Then if we speak about Egypt and South Africa, for example, they can establish regulatory harmonization. They can also establish like shared quality standards or apply shared quality standards, also mutual recognition systems and common manufacturing practices. This would reduce duplication and accelerate access to medicines across all Africa. The work of the African Medicines Agency is particularly relevant in this context.
Absolutely right. Thank you very, very much. Our guest, Dr. Amr Hamid, our economic expert. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and for joining us on the afternoon's edition of Africa Today. We move to more news where the U.S. State Department said it was concerned about reports that Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces and allies are massing forces around the city of Al Ubaid that could see an escalation in the conflict there. We have the details.
The United States on Monday warned that mass atrocities could soon be perpetrated in Sudan as paramilitary forces encircle the city of Al Ubaid, with Washington echoing fears expressed by the UN. The southern city in the Kordofan region of Sudan has been under siege for several months by the Rapid Support Forces RSF, which has been at war with the regular army since April 2023. The U.S. State Department said the U.S. is deeply concerned by reports that the RSF and their allied forces are massing forces around Al Ubaid. It said there are alarming indications that mass atrocities could be imminent. The UN Security Council earlier expressed the same concerns and called on paramilitary forces encircling Al Ubaid to back down. The UN has voiced fears that there could be a repeat of atrocities committed during the October 2025 assault on the Sudanese city of El Fasher, which it said bore hallmarks of genocide. The conflict in Sudan has killed tens of thousands of people and forced more than 11 million from their homes. It created what the UN describes as the world's largest displacement and hunger crises.
And Uganda has confirmed one more Ebola case. The country's health ministry reported the case, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 20 people. An online health ministry portal showed the number of recoveries was about 14, with 4 current admissions and 2 deaths. It said 5 cases were local, whilst 15 were imported. Finally, African nations are having a standout run at the expanded 48-team 2026 FIFA World Cup, posting an overall group stage record of 2 wins, 4 draws and 4 defeats. Let's take a look.
Despite difficult match-ups against traditional powerhouses, African teams' resilient displays suggest they are highly competitive on the world stage. As for Cape Verde's Cinderella run, the tournament has been a fairy tale for the tiny island nation on their World Cup debut. They are unbeaten in their first 2 games. They secured a sensation goalless draw against European champion Spain and a 2-2 draw against Uruguay. They sit third in Group H and are heavily favored to advance to the knockout stage. Egypt sits at the top of their group after a dominant 3-1 victory over New Zealand, putting them comfortably on track to advance. Captain Mohamed Salah also made history, moving into the top tier of African players with the highest combined goals and assists in World Cup history. Senegal went head-to-head against reigning tournament favorites France. Despite creating several dangerous chances and hitting the woodwork, they ultimately suffered a narrow defeat but proved they can challenge tournament favorites. Other notable campaigns include Ivory Coast, who secured a vital early victory to aid their knockout qualification effort, while South Africa picked up a gritty 1-1 draw against Czechia in Atlanta.
And with the World Cup, we wrap up the afternoon's edition of Africa Today. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.